of course, there is a political decision, yes or no, which is independent of all this. But that political decision, in the case of Serbia and Macedonia, has been taken already. For all the Balkan countries, it has been taken already. And there is a firm commitment from the EU that all the Balkan countries will become members of the European Union.
Yes, sir, in the fifth row. And we have time for one more question, so please put your hands up.
Ambassador, as you know, one of the biggest problems facing Europe right now is immigration, particularly illegal immigration from third world countries. And what I want to know, or my question to you is, do you think the best way for Europe to solve this problem as European member states or as a whole union is to simply just shut off its borders and give up as many immigration rates as possible, or to work with the third world countries to sort of curb the tide of illegal immigration? And if so, how would they go about doing that?
Yes, as I mentioned before, and I thank you for this question, because I think this question of immigration is a very, very crucial one in the future. We face serious problems in Europe concerning this issue. Immigration has grown in Europe exponentially during the last years. It was already very important in some countries of the European Union. For some time, these immigration flows were internal of what is now the European Union, but since the last, say, 20 years or so, it is basically an inflow of migrants from other parts of the world to the European Union. Part of this immigration is legal, is done according to the rules that have been established, and generally speaking, when that's the case, it doesn't raise too difficult problems. It raises problems, nevertheless, but there are some basic aspects of their integration, of their adaptation to the country, etc., that are solved. The problem is that with this period of economic growth, very important and strong economic growth, the level of illegal immigration has also grown very sharply. And the problem with the illegal immigration is manifold. On the one hand, there is a criminal part attached to it, not to the immigrant. The poor immigrant that immigrates to gain his life is not a criminal, but the people that are managing that are normally criminals, those that are organizing the transport, the exit from the country, the transport, then sometimes the exploitation in the conditions of working conditions in the country where the immigrant arrives, etc. That's already part of a problem that does not exist, of course, when we talk about legal immigrants. Then, of course, is that many of the social safety nets that apply to the normal citizens of these countries and to the legal immigrants do not apply or do not apply completely to the illegal immigrants. That's a further problem. And then there is another problem, which is a very important one. When, after this period of economic growth and so on, there is a moment of crisis, it is very tempting for some people and some politicians to use the demagogic alternative of blaming the immigrants for the conditions of the country. And you lose your job because an immigrant is taking your job. And things are not going, the school system is not going well because it's overcrowded with the children of immigrants. And all this sort of very xenophobic kind of arguments that, although fortunately normally do not touch or do not really convince to the large majority of the population, nevertheless touch certain groups of population, and then that has a reflection in elections. And you see, and you can see in some countries in the EU, that some extreme right parties have grown considerably. Fortunately, we are still speaking in relative terms, but have grown considerably in the last years, And among other reasons, one of the reasons is precisely this one of exploiting the problems that creates immigration in this xenophobic and demagogic way for political purposes. But obviously, simply saying this does not solve the problem. The question is how we tackle this issue in a way that ensures that there is a fair response to the problems that immigration creates for all the participants in this reality, from the immigrant to the receiving society, etc., etc. And that is obviously not easy. But let's assume first one fact which is very important, and that these parties normally forget. In the case of Europe, it is very clear. Europe needs immigrants. Our aging and falling population means that simply to maintain our social security systems, we need an inflow of immigrants. So, large part of the demagogy of immigration being a terrible plague for the economy and so on is all the contrary. Our economies would, and our social systems would suffer enormously if there was no immigration. So it's a very complex issue that is already very present in our agenda at the EU. But for the time being, it is still difficult to say which are going to be the basic pillars on which the new solutions will have to be found, because there is also a cultural element there that is not easy to solve. And we have seen that, for instance, we saw a couple of years ago, for instance, in France, there were some clashes between populations from areas, suburbs of the cities in which were the majority of immigrant population, etc. All this means that there has been important failures in the way those immigrants were somehow welcomed or not so welcomed, and how they adapted to the conditions of the country. So all these are very complex problems that we have to tackle with urgency, I would say now.
No, that is, I think your explanation is very protectionist and jingoistic. And it ignores the fact that migration is a fundamental force in human history. All of us are migrants, including you. All our ancestors came from East Africa. And so the only difference between you and me is that your legs were stronger. So you walked all the way to Spain, and I got tired by the time I reached Pakistan. But we are all migrants, all of us, without exception in the world. But what happens is that a migrant, once he comes to a place, he tries to stop other migrants from coming in. And what gives you the right to migrate yourself and then to stop me from migrating? Because I think migration is a fundamental human right. It's a part of human history. And so if you are stopping me from migrating, I think you are a violator of human rights. And so there is no such thing as illegal immigrant. They are only the right to search a decent life and violators of human rights like you. And then, as for your problem about the aging population, please allow young Pakistanis to come into your countries. We'll take care of your population problem. Virile Pakistanis, just allow them to come into Europe. Your problem we'll take care of.
Ambassador, you're not obliged to answer that question. But we do have time for just one more brief question. If you would stand up, sir, on the aisle, and bring him a microphone.
Ambassador, I'm from the Metro campus in TNEC, and my question is about having the euro and a common monetary policy across Europe. I do understand that it has added to the prosperity and standards of living of Europeans, but when a financial crisis like this happens, doesn't it also spin out of control? And doesn't it limit the influence of individual economies?
To begin with, in the case of EU, I mean, if you forget now the rest of the world and simply look to the small world of the European Union, we have become so tightly knit together that the measures that can take a national government